Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to another video where today we are doing a similar one to my combat patrol tier list from a couple days ago, but instead we're doing the Spearheads for Age of Sigmar. Recently, of course, I've been getting into Age of Sigmar, and I started with Spearhead, and Spearhead is really fun, so I figured I would give my thoughts on the various Spearheads. I do have them pulled up on my other screen just so I can get a better view of them than just here in these small boxes. So first up, we have the Blades of Khorne. Now, the Blades of Khorne, model-wise, great faction. Really encapsulates the armored, bloodthirsty, super muscle-bound look that you want for Khornate mortal followers. And overall, I mean, this comes with your juggernauts, it comes with some of the elite armored guys, and then it comes with some grunts and a character. So it's about as well-rounded as a faction can really get, and I can't say I'd really want to swap anything out. This pretty much covers most of the things you'd want in a Blades of Khorne army. And overall, I think is a great spearhead, especially to start the army. Though I'm not super well versed on all the spearheads' different rules, as I really only look at the spearheads I'm interested in playing. And I like Khorne, the Blades of Khorne, but they're not a faction I'm terribly interested in. But just on the raw value of this, I think it's a great starter set. I mean, you get a core character, you get the cavalry, you get the armored infantry, and you get the light infantry. So it's everything you could want in a start collecting, really. Next up, we have the Cities of Sigmar. So the Cities of Sigmar, I've talked about this a little bit when I did my ranking their factions. They've definitely shifted from the Renaissance look of the old world human empire, something more akin to like Civilization 4, if you guys ever played that, because I played a lot of Civ 4. But they're not my favorite faction, all things considered. Though I think this is a fine spearhead. You get your cavalry, you get your normal guys, you get a horse-mounted character to go with the cavalry, and you get your big cannon with a armored shield. I don't think it's necessarily the most interesting or even like the best that this could have been. I think maybe including another squad of steel helms would have been a not bad idea. But, I mean, it covers most of your things. You've got your elite melee damage dealer. You've got some shooting, which this faction is known for. You've got your grunts, and you've got the core character of the codex, or of the faction. But still, I think this is more of where the Khorne goes a little above and beyond. These guys, they get a passing grade, but it's not excelling, you know what I mean? Next up, Daughters of Cain. Sorry, getting my K-gods mixed up. So this is a pretty solid spearhead, in my opinion. You've got some of your crazy-looking cavalry. You've got your snake people, which, as I mentioned, I really like the sort of Gorgon, if you will, aesthetic that some of the Daughters of Cain have. And then you've got your normal, witches that have all their daggers and they're posed really well. And then you get a sort of wizard leading the whole thing. I think overall it fills a very similar role to the Steel Guild, the Cities of Sigmar, where you get your cavalry, you get a ranged damage dealer, you get your standard troops, and you get a core character. It's a passing grade, but it's nothing more excellent than that, in my personal opinion, just because, well, I guess it kind of comes with the territory of being elves, right? You don't usually have, like, these big centerpiece damage dealers, but still, I think it's a very solid spearhead and earns it a solid B tier. I'm putting it higher than the Cities of Sigmar just because I like the snake people. They're very unique. Next up, we have the Disciples of Tzeentch. Now, I made my opinions on the Disciples of Tzeentch quite well known. I like their unique models, but I don't particularly like Zangors. Overall, though, this is a fantastic spearhead. It comes with your sorcerer guy on disc. It comes with 10 Zangors. It comes with 10 of your mortal followers, which look really cool. I dig the not almost gladiator aesthetic, which isn't something you would expect from Tzeentch, but they pull it off well. Then you get some screamers and you get some flamers. You've got an extra unit in here than you would usually get with the flamers. And overall, I think it's a great start collecting. I'm just not a big fan of Zangors, and honestly, I wish it was just another unit of 10 of the standard mortal followers. So I am going to put them beneath the... yeah, I think so. I'll put them beneath the Cities of Sigmar Spearhead, just because I'm a pretty big Zangor hater, but I can't deny that it's a great box, so I can't put it any lower than that. Next up, we have the Flesh Eater Courts, the sort of rabid, not quite zombie, not quite vampire, somewhere in between insane people that think they're very noble. As I mentioned, quite like the lore and aesthetics of these guys. Though they're not a faction I'd find myself particularly collecting. I do like the Spearhead, though. You get your standard grunts with the ghouls, I believe is what they're called, yeah? Crypt Guard, sorry. And then you also get their cavalry, which are on these sort of desiccated zombie bats, which are really cool. You get the big, or not big, sort of like medium-sized monster with that thing in the top right, the very large, what's it called? Vargulf Court, no, this is an abhorrent archagent, I believe. And then obviously the character. And overall, it's a pretty standard one. I think it gets the passing grade, and I like all these models. I think they're pretty solid. And I like that it includes a monster unit, so it does sort of bump it up a little bit. No, it's the same amount. Sorry. Sometimes I get a little confused when it comes to the count. I think I'm going to put these guys probably in B tier, but the top of B tier. These guys could be in A tier, in my opinion. Now we're getting to our first C tier. In my opinion, the Fyreslayer's Spearhead isn't great, but if the glove fits, right? This is very much a symptom of the Fyreslayers as a faction. You get your character, you get 5 elite Fyreslayers, and then you just get 20 Fyreslayers. This doesn't have a lot of visual uniqueness. They're all dwarves with orange mohawks wielding some sort of melee weapon. And it's just kind of a giant horde of shirtless dwarves. Now, I like dwarves. I think they're very cool, but I don't really like this. It lacks unit variety, and it lacks any sort of auxiliary unit. It doesn't have a cavalry unit. And I know that the Fyreslayers don't particularly have something like that, which is unfortunate, but it just kind of is what it is. Next up, we have the Gloomspite Gits. Now, I'm quite fond of the Gloomspite Gits because Gretchen are funny. But also, they do kind of give off Fable vibes. Now, I played a lot of Fable 2 and 3 as a kid, and the Troggoths particularly really remind me of Fable, which, gives me sort of a soft spot. But this is also just a very solid kit in general. You get your Moon Man. What's his name? Loon Boss, that's it. Not too far off. You get your Loon Boss, you get 20 of your little Shiv Gretchen with their little hoods. Then you get 10 dudes riding squigs. I love squigs, so I love that. And then you get 3 Troggoths for some muscle. This is a perfectly balanced combat patrol. You get your grunts, or spearheads, sorry. You get your grunts, you get your cavalry, and you get your extra muscle. It's exactly what you want. And overall, this is definitely an A tier. And I'm putting it above the Blades of Corn just because I like Gloomspite Gits more. Next up, we have the Idneth Deepkin. So these are your fish elves. And it includes the eels, it includes the sort of not quite shark, but also not like a porpoise. It's somewhere in between. And overall, it's kind of it's a fine combat patrol. I'm not going to say it's a bad combat patrol. It's just, honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of their basic infantry. I do like I like the fish stuff, but I honestly wish there was more fish stuff here. Because I like fish. They're very cool and they're funny. But it doesn't suffer from the same problems as the Fyreslayers, a Spearhead, but overall, I'm still not a big fan of this one, just because I'm not a big fan of their thralls, their basic guys, which knocks it down to a C for me, honestly. I think, because here's the thing, I want to include my personal opinion. Okay, I am going to bump these up to a B, because it is a good starter box. You get your extra damage with the shark guy, you get your cavalry with the eel people, you get your grunts, you get your character. It gets the passing grade, but it does not get anything more than that. So, next up we have the Auric War Clans. Now, I spoke about this in my ranking the factions tier list. I do like that they're playing with the dichotomy of Gork and Mork a little more in Age of Sigmar, which does add some variety to the orcs, but I am much more a fan of the traditional orc aesthetic than the Cruel Boys, though I still admit the Cruel Boys have great models. They fit very well into the theme they're going for. So that does knock it down a bit. It's Cruel Boys, not Iron Jaws, and there is no Iron Jaws Spearhead, at least not at the moment, which does sort of knock this a little bit, because I wish it was Iron Jaws, not Cruel Boys. But let's look at this from the Spearhead perspective. You get your boss on your hairless dog creature. You get a banner bearer character, which is a little interesting. Usually those aren't unique characters, but granted, these guys were a main enemy last edition, so it makes sense. You get 3 elite sort of knobs, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. with some sort of ranged weaponry. Yeah, they're not knobs, really. They're just normal orcs with giant crossbows. Then you get the really big crossbow, and then you get your standard grunts. Just the cruel boys with their swords and shields, or choppas and shields, if you will. So I think this one gets a passing grade, but it's on the lower end of it because there's a little lack of unit variety. Because you don't have an extra muscly unit, right? All these guys are going to be pretty fragile, which is pretty standard for the cruel boys. But just something would have been nice. Maybe I'm not really sure. What would the cruel boys get in place of one of these units? Maybe instead of the bowmen, they could get something like a Slogoth or something like that. Just something that's a little bigger, adds some variety to the unit. Just something to add some extra flavor. I'm going to put it in sort of the same area as the Idoneth Deepkin. So moving on from there, we have the Caradron Overlords. Now, I like the Overlords aesthetic quite a lot, even though I'm not a big fan of their traditional playstyle. And I think this is a pretty solid spearhead. You get your boat, your standard boat, not the extra big boat, which makes this actually a pretty good deal, just like looking at it from a raw value perspective. You get your 3 floating elite guys, you get your standard grunts, and you get one of their sort of masters in the void suit or the air suit, whatever it's called. And I think it fits it very well. It has unit variety. It has your core unit. It has your damage dealer. It has some extra auxiliary unit with the big boat, and it's got a character. I really couldn't ask for more out of a spearhead, and the boat looks really cool, and it gives it a lot of its own personality. So I'm going to put this in A tier. Next up, we have the Lumineth Realm Lords, so your pretty standard elves. This is a pretty standard, if just sort of passing, spearhead. Sorry, the words escaped me there for a moment. So we're looking at this. It includes your standard character. It comes with 5 sword elites. You get 10 spears and 10 bowmen. And this is a fine combat patrol, but it suffers from what the cruel boys suffer, and to a lesser extent to not quite the same degree as what the fire slayers suffer from. And it lacks a little bit of variety, mainly just because, well, bows and spears are undeniably different weapons. In model form, they don't look, they have similar appearance, right? They're usually in that sort of leaning back, aiming upward sort of appearance, which doesn't really help them stand out in a way that really matters. I just wish that maybe they included something that was a little more unique. That they have cavalry, if I'm not mistaken. They do. They have their sort of weird bird horses, which I think that's what I would have included in place of the archers or the spearmen, or even just their normal horses. I think either of those would have been a much better choice than just 2 units of their basic infantry, just with different loadouts. Or maybe swap out the swordsmen for the guys with the big horns, the hammer guys. Just something along those lines. So this is getting the passing grade, but similar to the rest of these sort of bottom tier ones, it lacks a little bit of variety. Though it's not like the Fire Slayers, where it's just the same thing 3 times in a row. Next up, we have Nighthaunt. Now, Nighthaunt is a pretty popular faction. I will say, I know the Spearhead's rules, and I saw them bowling over some enemies the other day at the store. These Nighthaunts are quite powerful. And I can, I appreciate the Nighthaunt aesthetic quite a lot, with all these sort of ghastly, cloaked figures swooping through with rusted weapons. And it's got the Scythe guys, which I think are pretty cool. And then it's got the 3, what are these guys called? 3 Spirit Hosts, which are certainly interesting models, very cool. And the character it includes, the guy wearing the helmet, I think is very solid as a leader for this. Though it does, again, sort of fall into that lack of variety that I think sort of hurts a spearhead, because when you're painting a spearhead, that's going to be a good chunk of models, and if you're painting the same thing over and over again, it can be draining, and that will be very repetitive, and it can get, again, very draining. You won't want to paint anymore. You need something to break up the monotony, which is something that I think, like, the Gloomspite gets. Even though they're a horde spearhead, they have these very different models. Blades of Corn, they're more of a middle tier one, but they still have, you have your armor, you have your flesh, you have your cavalry. What are they called? Caradron. They have, they have their floating guys, they have their basic grunts, so that gives you like hard metal and standard cloth, and then you've got the big ship, of course. So that definitely does hurt the Night Haunt a little bit, and I'm trying to think, what would I include in place of maybe the Scythe guys, or a unit of the Chain Rattles, the Chain Rasps, sorry. And maybe I would have included, I'm trying to think, maybe some of their cavalry. I think that could have been cool. Maybe 2 units of the cavalry, since they only come in 2s online. I'm trying to think, because you don't want to include any epic heroes, because I don't like including that in a start collecting sort of situation. Yeah, I'd say something like their heroes would have been a good way to break up the monotony of just painting up a bunch of basically the same model with a little bit of different weapons. But overall, again, it's not like the Fire Slayers, because you at least have the Spirit Hosts, but still, I am going to put it ahead of these guys, just because I think these guys are easier to paint than the Lumineth, and there are a lot of those Lumineth that you'll need to paint. They're very similar. The Maggotkin of Nurgle, my favorite Nurgle faction. And this is a pretty good combat Spearhead, I have to say. It has the Putrid Blight Kings, which I love those models. They're fantastic. Easily the best Nurgle models. And they are way better than Death Guard. Honestly, when I make my Plague Marines, I'll probably convert them out of Putrid Blight Kings. It includes them, so we're off to a good start. It includes some Plague Bearers. Plague Bearers as your sort of secondary. So you have your elite infantry, and you have your base, and you have your grunts with your Plague Bearers. Then you get the Spoilpox Scrivener, who isn't my favorite character, I will say. Not necessarily rules-wise, just model-wise. And then you get the 2, what are they, Pusgoyles? Something like that? Yeah, Pusgoyle Blightlords, which are very cool. They really take that Nurgle aesthetic to the maximum. They carry these huge scythes, and they're riding giant plague drones, which is a really cool aesthetic. They look very imposing and look very cool on the tabletop. But here's what I'm saying. I think instead of the Spoilpox Scrivener, I would have included one of the other HQs that isn't a demon, so to speak. I think I would have included, what's that one called? The Lord of... Not the Lord of Blights, but the Lord of Plagues. Like, that model is what I would have included. I think that would have sort of rounded out the aesthetic a little better. That's what I would have done instead of the Spoilpox Scrivener. But still, it's a great combat patrol. It has variety. You have your bloated armored guys in the Blight Kings. You've got your basic grunts with the fleshiness in the Plague Bringers, and then you've got your drones. So you have a lot of stuff to paint that's very varied, I should say. And overall, great Spearhead. I'm going to put it above these 2, mainly just because I like the Maggotkin of Nurgle more than I like those guys. Next up, we have the Osiarch Bone Reapers. Now, I made it very clear, I don't particularly like the Osiarch Bone Reapers. I don't like most of their range, and this is the most of their range I don't like. The HQ looks alright. Not really my favorite model. It does include the giant, what is this thing called? The Gothazar Harvester, which that's a great model. I love that. Very cool. It's got the skeletal horse head. It's filled with a bunch of skulls, and it's got big mace hands, right? Gothazar, great. Great. And then you get onto their cavalry, and we hit the stuff that I don't like. I don't like beefy skeletons. That's the best way I can put it. I don't like skeletons that are like these big, beefy elite units. It doesn't jive in my brain, right? Skeletons, with very rare exceptions, like skeleton champions from Oblivion, a skeleton they're weak, right? They're many, but they're weak. And elite skeletons just doesn't really do it for me. I don't particularly like this. It includes, 20 of the standard guys. Comes with cavalry, comes with the Mothazar, which does bump it up a little bit and saves it from the likes of the Fire Slayers. But overall, I can't put it that high because I don't like the models. But it is a passing grade. It's not a bad Spearhead. It just doesn't appeal to me. Next up, we have the Ogre Maw Tribes, your big sort of elite army. One of the most elite armies, excluding the Giants, which we will be getting to. And these guys... it's a solid combat. It's a solid spearhead, right? You get your big cannon boar, if you will. You get 2 boar riders, so you get some cavalry, and then you get 10 of your standard ogres with their melee weapon. Or is it 5 and 5? Oh, okay. It's slightly weird. I guess this is just how it works. You get 6 normal ogres, then you get 4 ogres with guns, and then you get 4 noblars, which are almost like the Gretchen of these guys, and then you get your big captain character. This definitely is a passing grade, but I'm trying to figure, where do I place it? I think I place it above the sort of samey ones because you have a few kinds of infantry. The gluttons and the lead belchers aren't terribly different, but they have different weaponry at the very least. And then you do get your boars, and you get the big siege cannon, and the captain himself looks very different from the rest of the tribe. So I'm not gonna knock it for that. And it's very solid. I mean, I remember last edition, the guy who owns my store got this, and this was like 800 points of ogres or something, which, hey, I mean, that was great value then. I'm not sure how it goes these days, but I think I am going to put them in the upper end of B tier, probably around here. So next up we have the Soulblight Grave Lords. So I'm not the biggest fan of Soulblight, which is funny because in fiction there's few things I like more than vampires, so you think this would be right up my alley. But I don't know, I'm not a big fan. I've never been a big fan, whether it's Warhammer Old World or Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I'm not the biggest fan of vampires, and I mean, I like the Blood Angels a lot. I made that very clear in my 40k ranking, but I don't know, these guys just don't do it for me. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just doesn't do it for me. Honestly, I think it might be sort of the mixed archetype that this faction goes for. You're going to have a lot of skeletons leading up your vampires, but honestly, I kind of wish it was just a pure vampire army, which I think you can do somehow, but you get a lot of skeletons here. I will say, this does not have too much of a repetitiveness problem, right? You get 20 skeletons, which isn't the most fun to paint, though they will paint very quickly, which is the saving grace there. But then you get the Blood Knights, who are these big armored guys. They've got these skeletal horses, so lots of variety there. They'll be fun to paint. And then you've got the Vampire Lord, who honestly isn't really a model I particularly like. I think it looks rather strange, and it's not how I like my vampires. It's very Nosferatu-like. And then you get your 3, what are these things called? Vargeists, which are solid models, I think. They're these big sort of savage vampires, which I'm not really sure how much I like those. But I'll give it a passing grade, and it doesn't have the sameness problem that a lot of the others do. I'll put it here. I'll put it just behind the cities of Sigmar. No, I'll put it above the cities of Sigmar. It's a better deal. Next up, we have the Stormcasts. Now, I quite like the Stormcasts boxed combat patrol. They have 2 because they have different ones in the starter sets than they do out here, which applies to the Skaven as well. So the Stormcast Spearhead is pretty solid. It's about as varied as Stormcast can get. You have your Griffin, Peter Griffin. You have your Griffin carriage, which is a pretty cool model, I'll admit. It's a carriage pulled by griffins. You have your Annihilators, which are effectively Stormcast Terminators, which gives them some brownie points in my eyes. I like my guys big and armored. And then you get 10 normal guys with their swords. You get your Banner Waver, and you get Indrasta, which, what's her name? Indrasta, the Celestial Spear, which Indrasta is a fantastic model. Probably definitely one of the better female models that Games Workshop makes. They don't have the greatest track record with those. Looking at you, Minka-lesk, I believe it was, for the Imperial Guard. That was not great. But, Indrasta is this huge, very intense presence on the model. I did not mean to go here. Sorry. I have my stuff pulled up on the other screen. But it does sort of fall into the sameness, but that's kind of indicative of the Stormcast. It's the same thing with Space Marines. You're not going to get the most amount of variety, and before you get on me like, oh, well, not like back in the day. It pretty much was back in the day as well. If you look at all the Space Marine Star collectings, it was pretty much the same thing. All the models are relatively samey, which isn't great, but the value's not bad. And it includes that great model in Andrasta, though I say that, but it's an epic hero, and I don't like including epic heroes in starter armies. So that definitely does not help their case in terms of being a great spearhead, which means I think I do have to knock it down. It's not a bad it's not bad, but as cool as Andrasta is, as much as I like that model, I can't deny that this is just not the best starter spot. I'm gonna put it behind most of these, but above the sort of mediocre passing grade ones that I gave. And next up we have Seraphon, my beloved lizards. So Seraphon is one of the smaller spearheads, I will admit, though it does include the giant Old Blood on Carnosaur, which is sick. I love that. That's part of the reason I want to get Seraphon, is because they have such a great spearhead. Mainly because of that Carnosaur, right? That's that big, huge dinosaur in the top left of that picture. You get him, you get your standard infantry and the Saurus warriors, and then you also have the Croxagore, which are more elite, brawlic lizards that aren't quite as accurate because they are very dumb. But this is a great spearhead. I can't... As simple as it is, it's simple but effective. However, given that it doesn't have that fourth unit, I do think I can't put it in A tier. I am going to put it in B. But towards the upper end of B, because, again, that Carnosaur is just such a sick model. And the Seraphon in general are so cool. Their model range is fantastic. One of the best GW makes. Next up, we have the Skaven boxed set. I quite like this Skaven box. Now, I wasn't super... when I talked about it at first, I wasn't super high on the Skaven, but this has most of what I like in the Skaven, but also, I mean, the clan rats I don't particularly like. They're rats, right? I said they don't do much for me, but it includes the Storm Fiends, which look cool. It includes the Warp Lightning Cannon, which is a really cool model, basically a giant death ray that uses magic rocks as power. And it includes just some grunts. It's a pretty solid spearhead. You have 2 units of your grunts, you have a wizard, you have your big brawlic elites in the Storm Fiends, which are tough, and they've got, one of them's got warp lightning, rattling guns, and then the other's got the flamethrowers, and the other has the big claws, right? It covers all your bases, and then you have that heavy fire support in the warp lightning cannon, which does those mortal wounds when it shoots, right? Overall, I think I'm going to put this in S tier. I know it's strange, because I was rather high on the Skaven by the time I thought it through, but this is a fantastic spearhead. I can't deny it. It includes, 5 units total, which is great, and all the models are good. Even if I'm not the biggest on clan rats, I can admit the clan rats look good. They're just not my favorite unit in-game is the main thing. Overall, fantastic. Next up, we have the Head Knights. Now, I was quite high on the Head Knights of Slaanesh because I really like their models. I do like the archers they have here. But I like the cavalry that are riding the Fiends, which look really good. I like the archers. Not the biggest fans of the, Fiend Gores? Fiend Bloods. Slangor Fiend Bloods. Because, I don't know. I think their models are solid. Don't get me wrong on that. But I would have included Painbringers instead. I think that would have brought up the variety quite a lot, because these Painbringers, A, look awesome, and B, they have an armored look to them. They're all wearing full sets of this ornate armor, which isn't really a thing in the Spearhead. You have your archers, which are these scantily clad warriors, and then you have the cavalry, are also scantily clad warriors riding their lizards, and then you have the Slangors, which are also scantily clad, granted monsters, but still very humanoid in their shape, all things considered, which does unfortunately knock this down a little bit. Again, I would have included some Painbringers. I think those are the coolest models in the faction, and that would have easily brought it to an A tier, but I am going to put it up probably around the Seraphon. I think it's in that sort of tier of really solid, though not exceptional. Next up, we have the Sons of Behemoth. You get your 3 Man-Eater Gargants, which I guess if there was a 40k equivalent, this would be armatures, yeah? And I don't know, there's not much to say about the Spearhead. It's 3 really tall guys that eat people. Yeah, it doesn't do much for me. It's very repetitive. I'm not sure how customizable the Man Crushers are, model-wise. I'm clicking through the pictures now. There's a good amount of customization at the very least. A decent amount. But, yeah, I mean, it's about all you can expect from a Gargant start collecting box. It's just 3 of the smaller Gargants. But that's kind of all it is, and they're all the same. It's 3 of the same model, although you can obviously change things up a little bit, which is nice, but it does lead to it looking rather samey, especially if they're all looking the same direction, because they're all pretty much in the same pose, except for their arms. I don't know. It's a good box, value-wise, I won't deny that, but it's not a favorite of mine. Aha! Now on to a true favorite of mine. Not only because Slaves to Darkness are the coolest model range that Games Workshop makes, but this is a great start collecting. You get your Chaos Lord, you get 10 Warriors, you get 5 Knights, and you get your Chariot. So you have your not grunts, sort of like your infantry, your basic infantry in the Warriors of Chaos, which are a great model kit that paint up really well. Then you have your Knights, which are your melee elite damage dealers, which is nice. Even though they're monopose, I really don't like that. They're monopose models. And then you get your Chariot, which gives you an auxiliary unit that can deal with infantry okay, but is mainly useful for its speed. This is a very fast combat Spearhead, and is overall probably my favorite. Not only just because, well, it's the Spearhead I own, but also, I mean, it's perfect. You have an auxiliary unit in the Chariot, you have your core troops, you have your core cavalry unit, and you have the core HQ of the faction. It's fantastic. Next up, we have the Sylvaneth. Now, the Sylvaneth is excluding the Sons of Behemoth, before you say that, is the smallest smallest Spearhead at only, what is this? I can count this 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10 models. Now, I will say that is helped a lot by the fact it includes a giant tree warrior, which does add a lot of bulk, and the archers are very large models. I saw this at the store the other day. This is a surprisingly big model-wise for how few model count it is. Each model is very large. And I mean, it includes pretty much a lot of the range, excluding like some of the huge things like Alariel, I believe her name is, the one riding the beetle. But, I mean, it includes your core troops. It includes your giant tree dude that can act as a damage soak and, hits pretty hard. 3 archers that look really sick. And then you get a wizard for your HQ, which has a centipede coming out of it, which gets it bonus points from me. Yeah, this is a great one. The Sylvaneth, as I mentioned, there's just such a unique-looking faction. Like Ent's gone sicko mode. Ent's going crazy mode. It's just a great kit. It really is. I will say it's not like the most enticing collection, but Sylvaneth are a relatively elite army as far as I know. I'm not super well versed on their lore, but they're very elite, so it makes sense that there's not too much going on in the Spearhead, but that also means the Spearhead includes most of the core choices, so it's fine to double up on. It really is. It's solid. It's really solid. Whoops, something just fell off my table. I'll put this in the sort of the top of B tier, I think. No, I'll put it in A. I know it's low in model count, but it's got good variety, despite they're all tree people. And overall, it's just solid, right? It includes all the core choices of the army, which then sort of makes it the perfect starting ground to then build out into whatever else you want. Do you want to build heavily into the tree lords? Do you want to build heavily into sort of the flying units? These guys can act as the backbone to your army. It makes it a great spot to start collecting, which is also what a lot of the other top tier start collectings or spearheads had. Next up, we're on to these are the starter set spearheads. So this is the Wait, is this... No, it isn't, actually. This is the Stormcast, but I'm confused on which Spearhead this is. I think this is made from... This is obviously made from Skaventide. Man, I actually don't know. So what's included here? So it's... Oh, I think I see what it is. You get 10 of the dudes with shields and hammers, 3 flying guys, your sort of wizard character, and then you get your hippogriff character. It is what I have pulled up. It's just there's, I believe, a couple more things from the starter sets. I'll pull it up just to make sure I'm not messing anything up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check here. With your... Okay, 3 prosecutors. Okay. Okay. Yes, this is what I thought it was. This picture just has them in a different layout, and I don't know if that's totally right, is it? I pulled this from the starters. I know this is a total side quest, but I'm trying to figure out why does this look so different? It must just be the way they have things set up, right? Because, hold on, let me count. 1, 3, 5. I mean, that must be... I don't know. Regardless, it's basically the same thing. I think there's just more liberators. I'm going to say this is a better Spearhead than the sort of standard Stormcast, just because it doesn't include an epic hero. Though that does mean the normal Stormcasts are a solid... They expand on each other really, really well, I think. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. And I think that puts it above the other one, but I don't think it's anything stand out. Here, I'll pull up there. I'm pulling up their full on 193. Wait, Indrasta's Spearhead. No, that's not right. I need the other Spearhead. Oh no, what am I doing? I really shouldn't be doing this on stream. You know what? We're gonna stop doing that. We're letting that go. Regardless, I saw this playing the other day against who are they called? Nighthaunt. And I think it's a solid one. It's sort of, again, it's Stormcast, right? You're going to get not too many models. You're going to get a lot of the same model, pretty much, that are slightly varied. Okay, you know what? We're ending this here. It's a good Spearhead. I can't talk. All right, the Skaven. Okay, so this is... All right. Okay. All right. Basically what these are is they're Skaventide. This is 20 land rats. No, it's... What is this? 4, 6, 8. You know what? Yeah, 20. You get your Grace here. You get your guy on big rat dog thing. You get some rat ogres, and you get a ratling cannon. Overall, another solid one. I think I like the other one more, but still, this is a good Spearhead. Okay, the last 10 minutes of this video have absolutely gone off the rails. I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.